Okay, welcome back. This is the one missing video that I forgot to upload. So I'm doing it now. It is for the merging mechanics for the C# equivalent. So let's just see what we're going to be doing. We're going to start the game. Any minute now. Oops, I stopped the game. Sorry, my machine was a little bit delayed there. We have a spawner that spawns cubes. It will stop spawning once we run out of items, like list areas, and then we can combine the same kind of cube. We won't be able to combine different types of cubes. We can combine those two to get a super cube, and we can keep doing this till we have all the kind of cubes that we like. There's a limit. This is the final cube, so you can expand on this system as much as you want to get what you need. So we can keep doing this till we've used up all the cubes that we can. There we go. Okay, and then we pretty much are looking at that point where we're now out of, but each of these cubes could be assigned a value, like a currency value that will give you force fire. So we can't, once I combine those two together, I get an error because there is no cube to combine. So we have an index out of range. We don't have that. But the way it's set up is you can have as many as you want. But that's pretty much it. So let's get started. So I'm going to open up the file for the C#. I copied, all I did was show you the prep here. I have a platform. Each platform has a collider, which is just set to is triggered, so we don't want to stop anything from happening there. Let me move this up so we can see it. Oh wait, yeah, I need to remove the flow machine because we're going to be doing this in C#, so I'm going to remove that. Actually, we're going to have an issue here. So let me really quickly recreate this because these are using the incorrect prefabs. In my merging, I did create a C# prefab and a a bolt prefab. So I'm just going to quickly remove those. Let's just use these and let's create it from scratch. So it needs to be tagged as platform and tile. So it is a tile and a platform. We're going to add a box collider 2D because we're doing this as 2D. You'll see that we've had a combination of 2D and 3D in this series, just to kind of give you an idea of that you can do both of them, whichever way you want to do it, whatever you feel more comfortable with. So I'm going to make it kind of around about the size of the area that we can place on, like that. Set to is trigger, set to platform and tile. We're going to apply this so that whatever I do from here onwards is going to be applied to all of them. So we need to, I'm just going to duplicate this and kind of just reposition it off to the side. I'm not doing this in any way perfect. I'm just kind of really at this point using the snap tool and eyeballing it. Something like that. So we have the three. I'm just going to duplicate those and offset them in isometric view. It's way too low down. It needs to line up. Something like that. And then I'm just going to duplicate it one more time and move it down here. It ain't perfect, but it'll do. I'm going to move all of these to the center of the screen. Somewhere over here. And we are pretty much good to go. I'm just going to put this inside of the level asset so it keeps it nice and neat. Remove any existing rubbish that we have in here that is all from the previous bolt stuff. Delete these variables we don't need. And that's it. Okay, so now that we have a scene, all we did was add a collider to this object. And that's pretty much all that we need. And the tags. We tagged it as platform and also have a layer for raycasting. Okay, so that being said, that having everything that we have, I'm going to open up the manager because all I had was a canvas here. And we just have two layers in the canvas. We have a background layer, which is this dark one. It probably shouldn't be that dark. It looks really ugly. Let's actually just make it black. That way it will be just a holding shape. And then the one on top is going to be set to fill, so we can fill this up as we're waiting for for the cooldown period to happen. When it reaches the top, that's when we can instantiate a new tile. So I'm going to set that to be 0, and I'm just going to change the opacity of this just so that it's not all the way in your face. Something like 100 looks. Let's make it 80. That looks good. Okay, so that now that we have our scene ready to go, all we're going to do now is just start with the manager so we can control the spawn manager. So we can control what gets spawned and where it gets spawned. So we're going to start with that. So on the manager here, we're going to create a new script. Sorry, don't do it that way. I want to go into here. I'm going to delete this current one. I think that's the right one. Hopefully I'm not deleting any random stuff. Just removing anything that's got the word merge in there. I'm going to right click create. And this one's going to be, let's call this merge spawn manager. What the hell? Sorry about that. Let's try that again. Merge spawn manager. Once it is done and compiled, I'm going to assign this to the merge manager, and then we can open that up. I'm just going to open up my reference on the other screen and move this across. There we go. I've got my reference, and now we're ready to go. So we're going to start with creating the variables that we need. So we need to have a cooldown time basically, and we need a current time for the cooldown, and we're going to go from there. So I'm going to just start at the top here. And we're going to start with all the, if you will, the serialized fields. Hold on, if I don't actually select the object, we're not going to be able to. Let's just do it anyway. Let's, sorry, my throat is a little bit buggered. Okay, so let's do that. Let's add a serialized field. And it's going to be a float. And this is going to be the cooldown time. So how long do we wait before we instantiate cool time? Nice, cool time. Well done, whatever that's about. Next one is going to be a serialized. Actually, let's start one variable at a time that we need. This one's going to be private. We're going to keep all of them close to each other. This is going to be a float, and this is going to be the current cooldown time. So what is the cooldown time currently? And then the last one is just for the cooldown section. I'm going to make this a private, and we'll add the variables as we need. This one's going to be a bool, and this one's going to be, are we currently in cooldown? That's all we're asking there. Actually, it doesn't have to be a. So are we currently in cooldown? So those are the three variables we need to start with. Actually, we need one more just to be 100%. The next one's going to be, I'm going to make this public so you can see it, but this should be private. So let's make this public. It's going to be a list of objects that we find, basically game objects. So it's going to be a list of game objects. Give this a name, list of, let's call this available tiles. It's going to be equal to a new list of game objects like that. Okay, so what that means is we are going to look through the level, find all the available tiles that we can potentially put something on, and add it to this list. So at the start of the game, or in the awake, depending on how you want to go about this, we are going to call the following. We're going to say, we're going to go and grab the list of tiles is equal to, and we're going to find all of those items, all of those tiles with a specific name or specific tag. So how are we going to do that? We're going to go list of tiles.add. This should work. Let's try it. Why not? If you hover over add, it requires you to put in a round brackets, and we're going to go and say GameObject.find with tag. Let's find objects with tag. What is the tag? I think we called it platform. I could be wrong. Convert. Oh, yep. Sorry. We don't need the equals. I keep doing that. Keep mistaking between an array and. Let's see. What is the error? Sorry, it's not add, it's add range. There we go. My apologies. So this is a nice way of doing it. The other way to do this would have been doing a for loop and adding every single one, but I found this to be a nice shorthand. So find all the objects with this tag. So let's go double check that that is the correct tag. Open up the level platform. So we're looking for anything with the tag platform, and we are going to assign it to this list at the start, and then we're pretty much ready to go. So what we're going to do is in the update, because this is where we're going to be calling it, we're going to put in an if statement. We need to kind of put in a door that blocks any potential stuff from happening. So if we're going to check for the cooldown. So if the cooldown is true, then we're not going to be instantiating anything. We're going to be counting down. Okay, so now we're going to do an else. So if and else. So if we're counting down, let's do the countdown. If it's no longer counting down, let's instantiate a new cube. Now you could combine this with my tutorial on object pooling and then just enable and disable objects, but we're just using instantiation here just to keep in the same vein as what we did in Bolt. So what we're going to do straight after inside of the it here, we are going to grab our current cooldown time, and it's going to be plus equals to what? It's going to be plus equals to time.delta time. So this is going to count down in seconds if we do it this way. So every time we fire off in here, we're going to be going through it so that if I put in my cooldown time to be a second, this will decrease at that kind of rate that allows us to count down seconds. Okay, so first we're going to do and say, oh, we're not add, yeah, we are adding. So we're going to say if it's 2 seconds, we're going to count up till it reaches 2 seconds. Okay, and then underneath that, we are going to go and we need to actually have an image so we can update that fill amount, that little bar that we have on the bottom left. So let's go and type in using Unity engine.ui. And over here, we're just going to add a list. It's going to be a serialized field, so I'm just going to put it down here because the rest are going to be private, basically. So this is going to be a serialized field. It's going to be an image. And we're going to call this cooldown bar image. Let's call that. It's going to be the cooldown bar image that we're using. We're going to update that after we've done this. So we're going to say that looks right. So we're going to say cooldown bar dot fill amount is equal to, and we're going to say what is it equal to? It's going to be equal to the current cooldown time. So we're updating the cooldown bar there. Probably want to move it a little down, so we might move it down. I'm just following my bolt, and I think we need to reverse engineer this a little bit so we don't get any weird results. So we're going to go here. Okay, and we're going to put something above this before we do that. So yeah, we definitely need to do that. So I'm going to just add a new variable, so we're going to keep track of it. Let's call this is going to be a throwaway float. Call this cooldown value normalize or normal. Let's just say that is equal to, and what is it equal to? It's going to be equal to the current cooldown time multiplied by the cooldown time. So what that means is we take the small value multiplied by the big value, and we get a value between 0 and 1. And then I'm just going to use that value as opposed to that one in there. Just so that, because the fill amount slider is between 0 and 1, I just want to make sure we are normalizing that value before we feed it into the slider. Okay, so now we need to have an if statement. So what happens if the cooldown value correct? Nope, not correct. I lie. My So we actually need to double check if the current cooldown time is greater than or equal to. So let's try that. Let's just do the current cooldown time is greater or equal to the cooldown time. So we're saying once this value is greater than that value, then we are going to be able to do something here. We're going to say you are out of time. So we're saying grab the current cooldown time, take a look at that value, and inside here we're going to say once we've run out of our cooldown, all we need to do is say cooldown is equal to false. We're no longer cooling down. We're going to set the current cooldown time to be equal to 0. So we zero that value out again. And then we take that value and we feed that into the fill amount. So we're going to grab the cooldown bar image dot fill amount is equal to 0 as well. So we're zeroing out all the values. We're just resetting the entire system over here. So let's just say reset system after cooldown has been completed. That's all we're doing here. So once the cooldown has been completed, we're setting the cooldown to be false, we're setting the current cooldown time to be 0, and we're setting the cooldown bar to be equal to, I guess we could do this. That way we don't have to type things more than once. Okay, so that's it for the cooldown side of it. Okay, I'm going to go back to Unity just to let it recompile a little bit, because it does get a little bit sluggish on my end while recording videos and all that. Okay, let's see the manager. We have our cooldown time, which I think I'm going to, for testing, I'm going to make it like 2 seconds. Our cooldown image is this one here. And all we have left to do now is do the side where we actually go through the list, grab the image, grab the item player, and randomly select one of these tiles to spawn something on top of. So let's do that. Boop, go back to the script. So inside of the else, this is where that happens. We also need to put in a failsafe. Always think of failsafes, and this failsafe is going to be using the list of available tiles. We're going to say if the list of available tiles is .count, so we're getting the count of that item, and we want to compare it to. So as long as it is not equal to 0, that means we still have tiles in the list. So we only care about if the list isn't empty, because every time we have a tile that's available, we keep it in this list. If it's not, it becomes unavailable. We remove it from that list. And we'll add it back in when we move the objects around. But for right now, we're going through this list. We're removing the list from this tile. And then when it reaches 0, we're pretty much done. So what do we do now? We are going to say, we're going to create a a variable where we're going to go and say that we're going to find an object to spawn, and then we're going to spawn that object at a later stage. So I'm going to create a variable here called, it's going to be the type game object. Let's call this tile, let's call it tile to spawn on. It's going to be equal to, and we're going to do a available tiles dot, and we're gonna not dot square brackets, my apologies, we're gonna go random dot range, and we're gonna get a range between 0, which is the minimum of the list, comma, and then we have to get the big value, the list count. So we're gonna do the exact same thing here. We're gonna go and type in available tiles dot count, and we're gonna do a -1. The reason we do a -1 is because chances are we probably actually should do that over here as well. We'll double check that if we get an error. Is that the list starts at 0 and it counts up. When we do the count, it starts at 1 instead. So we're going to always have this one offset value, which could cause a lot of grief in the long run. So that's why we put the -1. So we're grabbing the object in the list. We're storing that temporarily in this tile spawn object. I'm going to add a new line. Now that we have a reference to that, we are going to we actually don't even have a reference to the object we're going to spawn. So at the top here, we're going to go serialized field. It's going to be a game object, and we're going to call this, let's call it prefab to spawn. Because it could be anything. Mine, I could call it cube, but prefab to spawn is generic enough for you to use this system for anything else. So that is the object we are going to be spawning over here. So over here, we're going to go and say, and we're probably going to want to also make a, I call it a throwaway variable. It's a variable that gets created inside of a function, and when that function ceases to exist or stops working, we clear that out. So that function, that variable I just created gets created and destroyed. So this variable here keeps getting created and destroyed every frame. So you probably, if you're using this a lot, like in this case, we probably want to just, let's quickly grab this and create it up here. So we're going to go down here, create a private game object, and let's just call it that rather. Let's do that instead of adding to the garbage collection. And we're going to do the same thing for the, actually the game object, that's fine because that's always going to be changing, but we'll leave it like that. So next one we're going to do is we're going to say, let's make a game object, call this current prefab, and it's going to be equal to, and we're going to instantiate. And what are we instantiating? We're going to instantiate the prefab to spawn. Where are we instantiating it? At the tile to spawn on dot position, sorry, dot transform, because it is a game object, dot position. And if you are rotating tiles, it's safe to just go and say tile to spawn on dot transform dot rotation for the rotation as well. You could just do a quaternion dot identity if you don't want to actually do any kind of rotation. And then the last part of this is I want to actually, we're going to have to come back and add some code to that. We're going to need to add some code to this at a later stage, but let's just double check that we're doing everything good. So all that's left to do over here is to set the remove this tile from the list. So we're going to go and say available list of available tiles dot remove. We're going to remove the tile to spawn on, because then no longer can you spawn on this tile, and then cooldown is equal to true. So now start the cooldown period, because now we've done all of this, instantiating it. Let's move on to the next point, the position. So let's compile that and suss out what happens there. Also see if my offset is right. I did just grab this image, so let's just double check everything is working. What prefab am I spawning? Hopefully I was smart enough to make a C# prefab of the cube. Just open this up. Remove whatever's missing there. Okay, so this is the prefab I want to instantiate. So I'm going to go and grab my manager, grab my cube, drop it in there. We're going to see our list gets populated when the game starts. I'm going to pause the game. Notice how we have a list of all these platforms, and notice how as we go the list gets smaller and smaller every time we find a new cube. And it should stop when we get to the end. There should be no longer any more. There we go. We are not allowed to instantiate anymore because the list is now empty. So the code is working, and when we didn't get any errors, which means the count was correct. And that's it. So now that this is working and all these cubes are here, all we want to do is be able to click on them, move them around, and re-update this list with new available tiles. So now that that spawner is working, and we can check it one more time. What's really nice about the way we've done this, if it's for the cooldown, we can make it smaller, like a second instead, and just watch it. And within 9 seconds, we should have all of these tiles filled up. And then the code stops. Okay, so we had one more over there. So I want to just double check that I don't have more than 9 cubes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, it spawned 9. So that last little bit of fill amount happens after the cooldown. So we are probably going to want to just quickly go into our code and rectify that. So this if statement over here, we're probably going to want to grab this line of code here and put it at the end here. We're going to go and if the list is not empty. So what that means is we are not in there, my bad. Let's put it up here actually. Let's see if that works. So that way we don't go into this entire system at all unless we have an item in the list and cooldown is true. Because over here the cooldown goes true, but at the same time, you know, stuff happens. So let's see if that works or if I just broke it. Should be fine. Can't see why not. Let's clear that out. See. I'm just watching that fill bar to see that if after the last one is placed, the cool bar, there we go, that worked. So the bar is no longer being filled up because we had that one time where it filled up just after we filled up all the tiles, and that looked weird, like we were waiting for another one and we couldn't have another one. Okay, so now that we have the manager, we're good to go. We are ready to speak to these objects, talk to each other. So what the next step is to actually do the code for this little cube here. This little cube needs its own piece of code that we're going to use, as this object is going to be the one that we're going to interact with and move around. We are going to need to have a script for that. So let's go into the scripts. I'm just going to open up this one so that I have a reference to it. And we're going to create a new script here. Apologies, I clicked off my reference. Okay, I'm going to create a new script here, and we're going to call this merge. Let's call it merge prefab controller. That's what that does. So okay, and we're going to open that up. I'm going to go back to get my reference again. Okay, so now that what we need here is we're doing something different. Every time I kind of do some code, we're gonna revisit a lot of things, but I'm not gonna do a get button down. I'm not gonna do a raycast. Oh, I'm gonna raycast, but not raycasting for the cube. I'm gonna use a built-in functions for Unity. We're gonna do an on mouse down. The next one we're gonna do is an on mouse drag, and then the last one we're going to do is an on mouse up. What that means is when my mouse is over the object and I click, it's going to fire off this down event. While my button is down and I drag the mouse around, it's going to record my drag, and then the last one is when I release the button. So each of these stages is going to do something for us that we need. So we're going to be doing things in each of these different stages. So we need to create again a few variables. The first one being, they're all, for the time being, these are all going to be private, with the exception of the first one. The first one is going to be a serialized field. It's going to be a list, and it's going to be a list of sprites. You'll notice as I start typing sprite, like that, and we're going to give it a name. Let's just call this list of sprite images is equal to a new list of sprites. So what this one does is this is going to be, let's put a comment, list of images that represent the, call it prefab because that's what we're calling. So whatever, so prefab for each level of merge. There we go. So each level that we merge, I'm just going to go down the list. So the first item in the list is going to be the normal cube. The second one's going to be the new, a more fortified cube, and the last one's going to be my gold cube, the gold trim cube. So I'm using the list to just kind of add it. It's quite artist friendly. It makes sense. So we're just going to cycle through. So the next one is going to be, what is the current object we raycast to? So I'm going to make this one private. This one is going to be a game object. And we're going to call this current raycast object. So this is the current object that we're raycasting to, that we're overlapping. The reason we're not calling it a tile is because it could be one of the tiles or it could be one of the cubes. Because remember, we can raycast for that object and pick it up and then compare it to another cube or compare it to another platform to see if that platform is available or not. So that is what we're doing here. We're just raycasting for that specific object. And then the next one is going to be private, and this one's going to be a vector 3, and this is just going to be the, let's call it current position. Probably should call it current prefab position. There we go. Let's call it current prefab position. And all that's left to do here is create one more for the time being. Again, serialized field. It's going to be a layer mask. We're just going to call this layer. So this is the layers we're going to be raycasting for. Let's talk about that, because I'm going to be using numbers as opposed to names for the layers. It's just a little bit faster than always looking for strings in your code. Searching for strings is expensive, so you want to use it sparingly. So if I select one of these tiles, it's currently set onto tile, but that is layer 10. And the cube that we're using, the prefab, is on layer 11. So we're going to be doing this sort of stuff here. We're going to switch around things. Talking about switching around things, I completely forgot about one more line of code. In our merge manager, once we've done all of this, we are going to, and we've removed this tile, we are going to go and say tile to spawn dot layer is equal to, and we're going to say 0 being the default layer, so that it won't be calculated in the raycast event that we're going to be firing. That way we don't have to compare, oh, did you hit this, did you hit that kind of thing. So if that tile is unavailable, we won't be able to move the object to that layer. So this tile is now set to layer default, which is 0. Okay, so let's start over here. So the starting point is simple. When we start, we are going to go and grab the object that we're dragging, which is the object the script is on. We're going to say current prefab position is equal to transform dot position. So as we pick up that tile, as we click down on that little cube, we get that cube's position, so that if at any point we don't actually land on something, we go back to that original position. So that's all we're doing there, really. That's about it. And then all we do here is the exact same thing here. We're going to go and say game object dot layer let's try this. Oh yeah, sorry, we need to get, that was dumb. Let's type in this dot game object dot layer is equal to 0. We're also zeroing out this layer. I don't think we need to do this dot. Hold on. I think we've surpassed this dot generation. Okay, so when we click down, we're saying please grab the current position and set that as the object and set that into the current prefab position. Next one is grab the game object layer and set it to 0, so that it also is not being calculated in the raycast. That's all we're doing in this. That's all we're going to do here. So let's just say over here, get the current position of the cube and set the variable to that value. That's all we're doing there. And then over here, set the cube layer to default. Let's test if all of this is working so far. So when I click on this cube, I should get this default value. You'll see it now when we spawn it. Okay, so what I want to do is just make my, we instantiated, we're going to have clicking issues. Let's just see if we do. When we start the game, I'm going to pause the game. I'm going to grab the first cube that we have. Notice how it says cube. I'm going to click on it. And the problem with this is the two cubes are on top of each other. So when I try to click on this one, I'm essentially it's struggling to fight it. So I'm going to go back to my manager and just give it a small offset. So we're going to go to our merge manager where we instantiate this. We're going to move this position here. We're going to cut that out. We're going to go new vector 3. I'm going to say transform.position x can stay where it is, comma dot y can stay where it is. But the Z offset towards the camera, I'm going to make it like minus 0.1. You won't see it, but it will make a difference to our click. Because the camera is orthographic, you won't see that. So the Z, the reason it's negative is because when it comes towards camera, in the case of a 2D game, it's going in the negative value. So I'm moving it 10 centimeters essentially towards the camera so that it's physically in front of the level. I can show you that now. So when we start the game, I'm going to also just slow down the tile merging amount. This is crazy. Let's go here. Let's make this like 10 seconds. Okay, let's pause the game. Let me split the screen here. Let's go into 3D mode so you can see what I mean by the tile is now. If you look at the tile, it's hard to tell, but if we go all the way around here, the tile is about 10 centimeters away from the platform here, which means if I select this, it's currently set to cube, and I click there, it's giving me crap. Okay, so let's go fix that collider size. That collider size is giving me rubbish. So let's go in and grab this prefab, drag it into the scene just so we have reference. I want to change this collider. It's conflicting with that object's collider. So I'm just going to quickly move it up to here so I can see how big this collider needs to be. Okay, so I'm going to make this collider about the same size as the collider that is underneath it. Should be good. Actually, not that big. Let's not go crazy. That should be fine. Honestly, that should be fine. I don't know why it's giving me grief. Box collider 2D should be good. So I'm going to try this again here quickly and just see if with it selected. Okay, so let's debug this. Let's see what's happening. So let's close that and let's go here. So over here on mouse down, I want to see why it's not actually doing that. So I'm going to log it. Okay, down. Let's just call it down. Let's see if it logs this out. If it is logging this out, then this layer is not being set correctly. So and it should actually be a negative value. I'm going to double check. Here's my camera. Here's my cube. Oh no, the camera's on the other side. Okay, so no, it needs to be a positive value. My apologies. I must have moved the camera around. So it's going to be 0.1f, not negative 0.1f. So let's do that rather. That's probably where my problem was coming in. Okay. Let's try this again. Now we should see it click and we should see it. Why are you not clicking? Why are you not clicking? Let me apply this to make sure it's actually applied. Oh, the script's not on the object. Oh my word, people. Oh my word, I had a very blunt moment. So let's get our merge prefab. That's what I wanted. Merge prefab and apply it to the actual object. That would have been great to start with. I'm also going to just set this to be tile and cube for the layer mask while I'm at it. And I'm quickly going to add these images. The images are simple. I just got them from, again, I've been using Kenny's stuff a lot, so I'm using these three. So this is going to be my level 1, level 2, And then the last one's going to be the gold one, level 3. So these are all my images I'm going to use for each of these crates. So let me apply this prefab and remove it, so we can actually see if it is working as intended. So the console should stay down when I click. Oh my gosh. Let me guess, now the thing is in the wrong direction. Let's see, there. Where's the camera? Oh no, now it's on the opposite. Oh my gosh. Sorry, I'm all over the place. Apologies for that. Let's go back to our merge spawn manager and put a negative value back in there again. Minus 0.1F. Sorry if you're not, it was just my brain power is not strong today. So that value was facing the right direction as I expected the first time. I just, because the script wasn't on the object, I assumed it wasn't, so I went in the opposite direction. So let's do that again, shall we? Okay, now select the prefab. I'm going to click on it. It says down, and it changed the layer to default. So we know it's working. Finally, success. Holy crap, that was rough. So let's go back to the code and continue. So now that that's working, we'll leave the down there for now as for debugging. We're going to go into the drag. What are we going to do when we drag? We are going to move this object. So we're going to go transform.position is equal to, and what is it equal to? I'm going to be doing some lazy programming here. I'm going to go camera.main. You want to get that a reference to that camera before you do this. This is not the right way to do it. Actually, let me show you the right way. Let's not be that lazy. I'm going to move all my serials up there. At the top here, I'm going to make a private. And let's make a reference to the camera. We're going to call this cam. And we're going to create an awake function. And at the awake, we're going to go cam is equal to, and we're going to say camera.main. So we're going to find the camera in the scene that's .main. We're going to set that to be the camera that we use. That way we only do that call once. So let's say get the main camera from the scene. That's what we're doing here. We're getting the main camera from the scene, and down here we're going to go and say cam dot, and this is where we're going to go and get screen point to world. Screen to world point, sorry, I keep saying it wrong. We're going to put brackets in here, and what are we doing? We are going to find the position of the mouse. But I don't want to offset, I don't want to move the object in the Z towards the camera, so I'm going to create a new vector 3 here, and we're going to say apologies, input dot mouse position dot X for the side to side, and we're going to go input dot mouse position dot Y for the up and down, and then the Z, we want to keep it as this object's Z, so we're going to say transform dot position dot Z. There we go. So that is going to be doing the moving. So we're going to be able to move this object around as we right now. So we're going to say move the object where the cursor is in the Y and in the X, but ignore the Z, leave the object Z alone. That's all we're doing there. So I've saved it. I'm going to go back to Unity, and I should be able to left click on it and move it around. And then we're pretty much done with the drag part of this code, because the rest of the code happens in the actual when you release your finger. So I'm going to grab this. It has disappeared. Oh, there it is. Let's try that again. I just want to see where it disappears to. So, oh, it just ends up. Let's see, I'm going to put that over there. I'm going to pause the game to see where this cube is that I'm actually clicking on. Oh my word, I did it. I did it. It's my bad. My bad. Okay, let's remove this and do this again. So let's be smart about this. Let's go new vector 3. inside of the vector 3, we're going to do the following. So in the X, we're going to go camera dot screen to world point. We're going to go input dot mouse position dot X. Okay, and then I'm going to copy all of this. Copy, comma, do the same thing, but this time we would do dot Y, and then we're going to go comma, transform dot position dot Z. We're not converting from a float to a vector 3, you asshole. We're getting an input dot mouse position X. Okay, so the issue was that I was putting the X inside instead of outside. So I go cam.screen screen to world point, input dot mouse position dot X, and then mouse position dot Y. So that's all I've changed. I just figured it out. And now we can try it out again to show you that we can now move the object around. Every time this screen to world position breaks my brain. There we go. I can move it around. I can release it, and wherever I release it, that's where it goes. So that's not what we want. We want to be over either an available platform or on top of a cube like it is here that is the same as my current cube. And then we combine the two together. But it shouldn't be able to go out here. So that's what we need to do in the next stage, which is in our mouse up section. So let's move on to the mouse up. But I want to start by creating a new function that we're going to use everywhere, so that's why we're going to do it right at the bottom here. Let's just call it private. I'll just put private regardless. I know a lot of people don't. Let's just call this, on null result. What that means, or at least what this function means to me, is if we don't hit, if the cube that we're overlapping isn't the same as my cube, or the tile is not available, or we're hitting that blue space in the background, this is what we're going to do. We're going to, let's put a comment here, if we have no location that is valid to move to. That's what we're doing here. So we're saying if we don't have any valid location to move to, then please go back to the, and this is where we use our transform dot position is equal to that current prefab position that we set up initially. And after that, we are going to set our layer. So we're going to go game object dot layer is equal to, and I think it was 11 or 12. We will find out now. Okay, so let's go double check what that layer is, because I'm not using the layer name, I'm using the, so let's just find out what that layer is. Yeah, cube is 11, so it needs to go back to layer 11, which is fine. So that's all we're doing here. We'll call this function when needed. That's all we're doing over that point. So we're going to go into here. This is where it gets heavy, so let's start at the beginning and work our way through. We're going to be doing a raycast, so we're going to be if, and we're going to raycast to see if we hit something, and then we're going to store that. But now we need to store that information. We're doing a 2D raycast, so we need to, let's just make a private raycast hit 2D. Let's just call this hit 2D. I prefer to do it up here. We're going to use it quite a few times, so we are going to need to, I prefer to reference it down here. So just before we go in here, we're going to go hit is equal to raycast hit 2D dot, what am I doing? Sorry, physics 2D dot raycast. You know when you go down a rabbit hole and you just kind of, and we're going to raycast from where? We're going to be raycasting from the mouse position into the world and we're going to hit something or we're not going to hit something. So first of all, we need the origin of the raycast. We're going to be using our cam dot screen to world point. We're going to go and we're going to find the mouse position. So we're going to go input dot mouse position. Again, in the previous ones, we've used screen to world, screen to ray. So we're just doing things a little bit differently. So we're going to say that is where we want to start our raycast. Then what direction do we want to go? We're going to go cam dot forward, transform dot forward. So we're going to find the forward vector of the camera in the direction to raycast. The next one is going to be how far into the world. I'm just going to hard code this. I'm going to say like 10 units. And then the last one is for the layer that we're hitting. Okay, so we're saying raycast from where the mouse is into the world in the direction of the camera for 10 meters. If it hits a layer that is in this layer mask that we've got, that we created up there, then we're going to come back as true. So we're going to copy that and paste it in there. Because this is a boolean, it's going to come and give us a hit result. So if this is true, if we hit something, we want to do something in there. If it didn't, else, if it doesn't hit anything, all we want to do is call this function that we've got. If we do hit something, we say, let's log that out. Log, and we're going to log what we hit. We're going to go copy, sorry, in here. I'm going to put in 2 quotation marks. I'm going to say, this is what we hit. And I'm going to put in 2 round brackets like that. And paste in the hit result. Dot collider, I guess. Okay, let's see if this works, or if I broke it. Let's find out. So what should happen is, because we're raycasting here, the object, when I release it, the object should go back to that position. So let's try this out. So let's start by making sure that the object can't go anywhere else. There we go, it goes back. If I go here, it said this hit, so we hit the hit.collider. Oh, I gave it a beautiful name. Well done. That's well done. So it is working. So it will always go back to where it started. And now we need to do the true statement. So we need to decide what happens if it's true. I did this code, this debug log completely wrong. So apologies for that. I will just do it the way that I normally do it. I was trying to get fancy, guys. I was trying to get fancy. Let's go plus. Let's go hit.collider. There we go. We'll leave that debug in there. So if we hit something, we're going to get that debug log telling us what we've hit. And now we're going to do a few things. We are going to grab the new position. So we're going to create a, we're going to essentially store a a new position variable. We have the current prefab position, so we should duplicate that and call this one the new prefab position. There we go. So we're going to say, once we do that, well done, this is the new position. And what is that new position? It's going to be based on what we hit. So we're going to go hit 2d.collider.transform.position. Now that we have the new position, we're going to use that. The reason we're creating a variable is we're going to be using it later on a few times. Let me just clear this out. Sorry, I'm just moving my code along. Okay, let's do this. Next step. Sorry about that. In here, we're going to say, okay, cool, well done. Now we have a variable up here that we did create called current raycast object. So we're going to say the current raycast object is equal to the hit 2d dot collider dot, and because it needs to be a game object, we're doing it that. If we don't put this in, let's remove this, you'll get an error. So because that raycast object is a game object, we need to say grab the collider, grab the game object that this collider is attached to. Okay, well we now need another if statement. So if, and we're going to check for something. So in this if statement, we want to make sure what layer we are raycasting for and do the appropriate thing. So if it's a tile, then move the object to that tile. If it's another cube, what do? We have to combine these cubes or something. So we're going to say if the current, oh my gosh, I don't know why it doesn't always work in here. My current dot layer is equal to 10, which is a tile. So if it is a tile, we're going to do something else. But because I only have 2 layers, we can just use an else. But if you want to be safe, you can also go else if, and you're going to say else if current is equal to, there we go, 11, which is now going to be another tile. We can do something else in here. So we can debug, I hit this or I hit that. So we're going to check to see what we're actually hitting and do what needs to be done based on that. So far so good. We're going to do the true statement. So we're going to do what happens if we actually hit a tile. So that's what we're going to do first. We're going to say, if we hit a tile, what are we going to do? If we hit a, if we find a match, what are we going to do? Okay, so this is, let's put a comment above this. Let's say found tile, and down here we're going to say found cube. So that's what we're doing. So if this is true, we're going to go and say, okay, well done, move this object's position to the new position. That's all we're doing. We're saying, okay, now that we've done this, please move this object to that tile. We're good to go. So we can test again to see if this works by simply just checking to see if we actually hit that object and if this object moves and snaps to the location. Okay, so let's see. So if I move it here, it snaps back. If I move it there, it snaps to that cube. Notice how it says this is what we hit, and it tells me that it hit the prefab block green C# 2. So if I move it there, it snaps. If I move it here, we haven't reset that cube. Be aware of that. So that needs, but we can go there and we can put this one on top of that one, or we can move it there, or we can move it here. So you can see we're moving it around. So we need to go, but it is snapping to the location. So that's a good start. Okay, so what are we doing next after we move the position? We are going to reactivate. So we're going to duplicate this line of code here. This game object.layer equals 11 and move it. Because now we want this object to be calculated in the Raycast. So now that we have that, we are setting the layer back to being a cube again, and we are going to be adding this. We need to reset that other tile layer. So let's do that. We need to do it before we actually, before we do this current Raycast. Yeah, we need a variable. My bad. I completely forgot because that's a current Raycast object. So we need to go up here and we need to add a public variable because this is going to be accessible by another one. And let's call this, let's call it parent tile. And it's, sorry, it's going to be a game object. I'm on a roll today, guys. Okay, so it's going to be a parent tile game object, and we're going to use that parent tile. Now don't know why I did it like that. That's horrible. Okay, so the parent tile we're going to set from the manager side, but we're also going to set it from this side. So we have the parent tile here, and we're going to say, once we get to this point, we're going to tell the parent tile dot layer is going to be, wow, let's try that again, shall we? Dot layer is equal to 10, I think that is. If the cube is 9, so we're resetting that tile, and we're also going to add it back to the list. So we need to add this back to the list. Now, this is where it gets interesting. We don't have any reference to the manager just yet. So the manager is the one with the list. So the merge spawn manager, this is the one that's got the list. So we need to be able to access this here from my merge tile. So let's do that. And in order for that to work, we're going to go to the top here. We're just going to make this, doesn't have to be public. We're going to make a reference to the merge spawn manager. So merge spawn manager, just call this manager. I think that'll be simple enough. So now we're making a reference, but now we need to assign the script. So at the start of the game, we're going to say manager is equal to, and we're going to find object by object of type, merge spawn manager, like that. And we're just going to put a comment of this, find the manager in the level. So that's what we're doing. We're finding the manager in the level, and we're assigning it to this variable, so that when we're down here, we're going to say, please set the parent tile back to 10, so it will be considered for raycasting, and go to the manager dot available. So we're going to type in available to find that variable, list of availables dot add, and we're going to add. And what are we adding? We're adding the current parent tile back into the list. And then after that, now this is where it gets a little confusing. So this one is we're setting the new position to the tile, we're setting the object back to 11, and we're setting the tile back to 10, the parent tile. But now that tile is no longer the parent, so we have to go say parent tile is equal to the current raycast object. There we go. So that is the new parent. Everyone with me? So, and then what we need to do again in this case is grab the current tile. This can get a little bit confusing. So grab the current tile dot layer and set that to be equal to 0. So we're just switching them around. We're saying, remember the old tile? Please set that layer back to 10 and set this one to 0. And then we also need to, because that tile is in the list, we need to remove this tile from the list. If that tile is available in the list, we need to remove it. So we're going to go and go here, grab this code here. Should probably just keep it all here. So I'm going to duplicate the list. So this one's not going to be removed. This one's going to be removed. And what are we removing? The current active tile from that list. Let's see how this is going, because this code is the big chunk of it. So if we can keep track of this, and if you guys are with me, I will show you what happens now. We're going to have keep an eye on the list of available tiles. Once we spawn one, you'll see that the list gets smaller, and once I grab from this, I should be able to move it across and show you how it switches those around. But for us to be able to see that, let me just see what tile we actually get first. Come on. There we go. Okay, so this one here is called Prefab Block Green 02. Notice how that name does not exist inside of here. So there's 1, 3, 4, 5, 8, 7, and 6, but it's not this one here. And this one's layer is set to default. And this cube is set to cube. So let's watch this as we go. I'm going to grab this and I'm going to drop it here. Let's go back to the manager. We got a variable parent tile of has not been assigned. Oh, jeepers, yeah, that is true. That is very true. Everything is working perfectly till I forgot the one thing. So parent tile needs to be a public variable, which it is. We're going to go into the spawn manager here, and we're going to say once you have spawned a prefab here, the current prefab, we're going to tell it which tile it belongs to, which is the tile to spawn on. So we might as well just do it right at the bottom here. We're going to say current prefab dot get component. This is the other way to talk to a script outside of making a reference. We're going to say, what is this called? Merge prefab controller. We're going to go dot parent tile is equal to tile to spawn on. There we go. So we are saying grab the current prefab that we just instantiated, get the script called merge prefab controller dot the variable called parent tile, and set the parent tile to be equal to this tile that we're basically spawning this object onto. Now that should remove that error, and we should be able to move this object around. So whichever tile we start on will have a layer mask of 0 or default, because that is what we set it to start with. So if we select that, it's currently set to default or 0. And when I move this, I'm going to move it to here. This one is currently set to 10. This one will become 0, and that one will become 10. And then this tile here, which is the 02, will get added back to the list, and this one here, which is 5, will get removed from the list. Let's see if that works as what I'm saying. So I'm going to move this across to here. Notice how this tile is now set to tile. If we go to the list, you'll see that it is now being added at the bottom here. You'll see that this one has been set to default, and you'll notice 5 is no longer in the list. And there we go, that's working. So we can just keep doing this. We can move it around. I should be able to go back to my original tiles. I won't be able to go to this one. We don't have logic for that yet, so that is working. Success. So let's continue. It can get a little bit confusing. It's not spaghetti code, not even by a long shot. We're just actually referencing in 2 different points. So now that we've got all of this code that says, please move me to the new cube and set the old cube's layer to be the original layer, and set the old parent to be added to the list, and grab the new parent, remove it from the list, and set its layer to be 0. So that's all we're doing here. So we are going to be doing some more fancy stuff here. Yep, that's it. So now we are going to go into the what if it's a cube that we're actually colliding with. So we're now going into this section. So that actually isn't a lot of code for what it does. It is doing what it's supposed to do. So inside of this else if we hit this layer, what are we going to do? So we're going to check for that. We're going to basically check the cube level, which we don't have. We don't actually have that. So we're going to create a new variable down up here, and we need to make this public. So let's just move this public at the top here. Let's move all the publics. They're going to become privates anyway, so let's just put them up here anyway. So this is going to be public. Let's call this, it's going to be an int, and let's call this, I guess, prefab level. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just trying to be as generic with my naming as possible. So this is going to be the level of the current prefab, which is going to be, let's by default set it to be 0. All cubes that get instantiated are level 0. There will always be a level 0 like in a lot of these merging games. So we're going to be comparing that value inside here. We're going to say, okay, let's grab remember we have a current Raycast object. So we're going to go and grab the That is true. The current Raycast object, and we're going to go and we're going to grab that current Raycast object and get its component, and we're going to say merge prefab controller. That's what it is. Merge prefab controller dot, and we're going to paste this prefab level, and we're going to say that prefab level of that object is equal to, and what is it equal to? We're going to grab the current prefab level. It looks like way too many underscores, and we're going to add 1 plus plus. So my system is simple because I like the fact that I'm comparing values and not like, oh, is this a fancy house and a fancy house, then they become a mansion. And if this is a mansion and this is a mansion, then it becomes an estate or whatever. What we're doing here is we're saying cube 0 and cube 0, if they're both cube 0, they become cube 1. If cube 1 and cube 1 become joined together, then it becomes a cube 2, and so on and so forth. It's simple numerical comparisons other than and nothing else. So that's all we're doing there. And what we're going to do with that value is we're going to go and say, okay, that's fair enough. What we want to do is we want to grab the image on this current object, because I'm going to delete this object and keep the one that's already there. So we're going to say current Raycast object dot get component sprite renderer, if I'm correct. There we go. Dot, and we're looking for the sprite is going to be equal to, and what is it going to be equal to? It's going to be equal to the list of sprite images, square brackets, and use the current level. But we're not doing it there. Oh, this is going to be tedious. Let's copy all of this nonsense and paste it in there. That's painful, but I should have actually just did a little like set, I guess, set this to itself, and then, yeah, anyway. But all we're saying here is find the item that is at this level, which is, in this case, it's going to say find the item at level 1 and switch out the image to match. Okay, let's keep moving. Sorry, I'm just moving my reference along so we can just test this out. Yeah, that's it. So all we have one more thing to do, or actually 2 more things. We need to say, okay, sweet, cool. Now that we've done this, we are going to now set the, we're going to grab the manager dot available tiles dot add. We're going to add the parent tile of this tile so that we can, because we're now going to destroy this object. So we're going to go and say destroy this dot game object. Actually, I think we can just say game object because this isn't necessary anymore. And that's it. That should do it. We're just basically assigning this tile back to the list, and we're probably, being smart enough, should assign the layer as well. Parent tile layer over here. I'm just going to duplicate that line and move it down here just to make sure that we cover our bases. And now we test to see if we have produced something that's worth it or complete rubbish. Let's try it. So we don't have any fail-safe to be able to exceed that list count, so we're probably going to want to go in and fill that. But as far as what we've got, just for management purposes, I'm going to set this down to like 5. So every 5 seconds we'll get a new tile to see if this works. Let's double check. Can't go over there. I should be able to grab it here and drop it there. Didn't actually assign the sprite. question is why it did not assign the sprite. Prefab level, prefab level, prefab level. Okay, let's double check why that did not happen. The cube layer, cube layer, cube layer. I'm going to double check what happens if I drag here to there. It did delete the object, which means this one should have a okay, so logic is not completely sound, so let's just double check why it is not. I think it's the way I'm adding values up. Let's go back to our script, which I closed like an idiot, thinking I was overly confident that was going to work the first time. Okay, let's go into here. So if we find an object that is on this layer, we are going to speak to that object and set the prefab level to be equal to this prefab level plus 1, plus basically. So grab this level and this level and add 1. That should work. I don't know why that didn't work. Then current raycast is set the sprite. We should be setting the sprite list of sprites to be equal to the current raycast object.getComponent.merge controller.prefab level. Holy crap. Actually, I think we'll just do this and actually just paste that in here. Maybe that essentially we're doing the same thing on both levels. And actually I don't really need to be grabbing. No, I do. And then we set in that sprite, and then at the end we're just adding the manager to the list, and we're setting this tile to be 10, and we're destroying this object. So let's see why that didn't actually happen. We're going to put a debug log in here. Say success, well merged. There we go, and let's see what happens with that. Let's see if we do actually get all of that happening, and if we do destroy the object and all of that stuff. Actually, I do not want that comment to be after we've destroyed the object. That does make no sense. There we go. Also, probably could be the case is, let's just double check that my prefab is also set up correctly and has all the images that we set up initially. Let's see, it's that one, and that one. Okay, let's try it. We should be getting something that resembles merging. There we go, successful. Oh, there we go. That is extremely weird and very confusing, because now it's fine. So let's merge these two together. There we go, merge those two together. But yeah, no, let's see. Yeah, but the prefab level isn't actually being stored. Why is that not the case? Let's double check that. But it did actually find the right image, which means... Okay, let's grab that. Prefab level 0. No, this prefab level should be 1. Okay, so it is working, but let's just refine one more tweak and see why it's not actually... I'm probably overlooking, you're probably kicking yourselves on that side of the screen like, what are you doing, you idiot? You're missing this out. Okay, so the current raycast object get component merge prefab controller is dot prefab level is equal to prefab plus plus. Prefab level plus plus. Can't we just do this actually? Let's try that, see if that works, because that should be referencing this variable here, and saying add 1. So let's try that. Because essentially it should be the same value. Makes no difference which value it is. Okay, let's just speed up this. What is up with my... There's a long delay between those two. There we go. Definitely an error here or a bug. Now at least the correct level prefab, but it did not grab the correct image. Let's see if it does it there. Hold on. I'm going to do an idiot thing here and grab all of that again. And let's just paste it in here, really. And over here I should just be able to grab the prefab level values. I know it's getting a little, it's not actually untidy, it's just overkill as far as the way it reads. So let's say close that and double check what's happening here. This letter completely compiled properly. Make sure everything is set up the way we want. Just for speed reasons, let's just make this 2 seconds. See, there's a big hold time there. Do you see that? That's very weird as well. Let's see. That worked. That worked. That worked. That worked. There we go. After I do this one, I'm just going to see what happens. This timer is off by a fair chunk. The fill amount and the time amount are not lining up correctly. But yep, we can't actually assign anymore. So if I do that and I do that, that works. Assign those two together. Grab this one, assign that one, put it there. Okay, so everything's working perfect. So now we just have to see what's happening with that timer, and then we're pretty much, I guess, done. So let's double check. That timer felt like it was working perfect the last time, and now it seems like it's not. So what feels like is happening is current cooldown time is plus equal to time.delta time. That's fine. Then we use current cooldown time multiplied by cooldown time to get us a value to fill up our image amount. Actually, we could probably just cut that and put it in here. But that means that this here is where the problem lies. So I'm going to expose the current cooldown time to see what it's doing. So let's do that. I do like a few issues that creep up just to kind of see how things are working and if they're working or if they're not. So we're just going to be watching this little timer. So the fill amount and the timer should kind of line up. There's no reason they shouldn't line up. Okay, so the timer's fine, the fill amount is off. Okay. Come here, my fill amount. Come here, fill amount. What are you doing, my little fill amount? Wrong script. Let's grab the manager. Okay, so let's see. Cooldown bar is equal to current cooldown. Okay, so let's just do a little bit of math here. I'm going to use a calculator to see if my logic is sound. So I'm saying if, let's say my current time is 1 second and I multiply that by 2. Oh, wait a second. Is it multiply or divide? Have I done this wrong again? I think it might be divide. Let's try that. I think I went crazy and my brain stopped working. Let's see it now. So let's compare that cooldown, that current cooldown time to the fill amount. Okay. Whoops. My apologies. I made divide, multiply, what is mathematics all about anyway? There we go. So let's combine these two together. Combine those two, those three. There we go. We won't be able to combine those. How were we able to combine those? How are we able to combine these? Yo, I'm just killing these things. Okay, problem number 2. We were able to just randomly combine things. So why was that? Why is that the case? We are checking to see if current layer is this. Yes. Why are we not checking to see if? Oh my word! How did I not even think to see that? Oh, okay. Okay, let's do an and. Let's go current Raycast object dot get component, and we're gonna go and say merge prefab controller dot what was it, layer, what, prefab layer. If the prefab layer is equal to this prefab layer. That was weird. How the hell did I just assume you could gel all of this together? Confuses the crap out of me. So we need to make sure that the current incoming prefab layer matches the current one that we're going to release on, and then and only then should we be able to do all of this. Now we should be able to test this. Now it seemed like black magic and it was working just fine, but clearly it was not. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger, fold the screen up as much as possible. Let's try this again, and then we should be done. Apologies for such a long recording. Something like this can be, let's see. There we go. Let me grab it onto there. Okay. Next issue is we don't have, we have an if statement for this. We have an if statement for this, and we need an else for this. So what if it's neither one of those? We're just going to feed this in there. So if, else, else. Let's try that. And then that's it. That should be the complete merging system. You can add as many images. You could also go and check to see that once it's exceeded, like once it's got to the top of its level and it's run out of limit, like upgradables, if you will, then you shouldn't be able to. There we go. Nice. Good. Good. Nope. Good. Nope. Yep, good. And then that we have an error because we don't have any result as it says index out of range. There we go, that's it. So just remember to clamp your values to between whatever level you have. Mine is set up to have as many levels as I want, as long as I actually have images, but I don't have images. That's why we got the index out of range. And that's it. So hopefully this has helped. Sorry about a little bit of a roundabout way of doing it today. Just been one of those days where things just were a little bit rough. So thank you so much for holding on all the way to the end of this video. And until I see you next time, please be safe and take care. Cheers.